Alright, so Some Ordinary Gamers came up with a new, well, it's not new anymore, it's like June 8th, so it's like almost 2 weeks old. Canadian law that is threatening YouTube. Which one is Bill C-11? Probably has to do with speech, but we'll see what it is.
Passing in Canada. Now you might be like, "Whoa, Mood, that's a combination of words that you're gonna have to walk me through." And I absolutely. Hello, guys and gals. Me, Mudahar, and YouTube kind of asked me to make this video. My partner manager came in and reminded me about a certain bill that's passing in Canada. Now you might be like, "Whoa, Mood, that's a combination of words that you're gonna have to walk me through," and I absolutely do. To remind a lot of people who are watching me, I'm from Canada. Okay, I'm from the land of maple syrup, the land of saying sorry every time you get into a traffic accident, regardless of who's wrong. I'm in the country that's known as the nicest country in the entire world. Actually, I don't know if it's entirely that. I think like Sweden or something.
I really don't agree.
The point is, Canada.
I would say Canada's the country of passive aggressive.
It's a beautiful country, and I'm proud to be a Canadian. Okay, I'm a patriotic Canadian. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
But being patriotic means being brave enough to admit that your country's not all as great as it is, okay? Now, to understand, when you watch YouTube, do you use the little recommended tab on the right? You know, you probably get recommended a video that you're like, shit, I'll watch that. See, the way that YouTube works, like most social media services, is they scrape your user data, watch your look at your watch history, all that stuff, and basically using all of those data points, calculate what you are likely to click on, okay? It's why channels like mine succeed in terms of videos, all right? Why a lot of channels succeed, because they get recommended to the people who are more likely to watch them. This is how YouTube maintains a lot of eyes remain onto it, okay? If you're a social media platform and you're not trying to keep people watching a video after another video, you are doing something wrong. If you haven't designed your system to constantly require you scrolling your feed, you've made a mistake somewhere in your design. Now, of course, YouTube promotes content of mine on an international market. To give you an idea of the people that are watching me, to give you some idea of like what my average viewer demographics are, I'm going to show you something in my analytics tab. According to my audience, all right, according to the audience section, you can see that my top geographic locations are the United States at 48.6%, the United Kingdom at 6.2%, and Canada all at 6%. You might be like, whoa, that's not a lot of Canadians. May I remind you, Canada has less of a population than the entire state of fucking California, okay? So we're a small but proud country. Now, of course, Canada is governed with several sects of law, some pretty draconian. Now, to understand, being a Canadian content creator, a digital creator, like many other people in Canada that make content, like Linus Tech Tips, like various other creators that
there's so many Canadian creators, it's crazy. And I would say the reason is because living in Canada is fairly comfortable. That's why, like, you have a lot of recreation centers, a lot of community centers, stuff like that. It's just what comes naturally, because you go to work 8 to 5, then you can go to the gym and you have a couple hours to yourself every evening, and you don't have to work too hard, and you can kind of maintain a decent life. Not saying you're going to be very rich, but you can maintain an easy life, so you have a lot of free time. And the weekends are usually free, and we have, I believe, 13 long weekends in a year. That's crazy.
Hey, watch, all right, I'm kind of blanking out for a second. Those creators would now somehow be subject to a new law that's being introduced. Now, this is Bill C-11. Bill C-11 is also known as the Online Streaming Act. And while Canada would like to claim, hey guys, social media services may face obligations in relation to some of their commercial content if Bill C-11 passes, users of social media services would not be regulated. Did you know Bill C-11 supports all Canadian artists? Did you know Bill C-11 will only apply to commercial content? I wish we could have a little bit of a misinformation flag, because vague, shitty laws, the reason why they're shitty is that they are so vague. So I wanted to go over a few things.
It's like, even if the current intention of a bill, I don't know what the bill is, but based on how he's talking about, I am gonna assume something like this. The bill will pass, and it would make it look like it's only for big media and stuff like that. However, what do you determine as big media? Can one creator that has a lot of viewers be considered as big media? Probably. right? It's like, and then you can easily like, well, what's a big creator? How many viewers? Right? And then it's like it just trickles down into like pretty much everyone. That controls everyone that basically fits into this arbitrary definition.
Things that honestly kind of freaked me out in this situation. Now, for one of the actual pieces from Bill C-11 that you can look up right now, all right, as of today, have each Canadian broadcasting undertaking shall employ and make maximum use, and in no case less than predominant use, of Canadian creative and other human resources in the creation, production, and presentation of programming, unless the nature of the service provided by the undertaking, such as specialized content or format or use of the language other than French and English, renders that use impractical. In which case, the undertaking shall make the greatest practical use of those resources. So again, to understand what's going on over here, is in Canada we have something known as CanCon, okay, which is Canadian content. All right. Now, for those of you who don't know what Canadian content is, it's very simple. Okay, basically there's a requirement by the Canadian Radio, Television, and Communications Commission to keep content Canadian. Think of it like a fucking protectionist policy, okay, for Canadian content producers.
Good to know.
So again, here's their criteria, if you will. The producer must be Canadian and is responsible for monitoring and making decisions pertaining to the program. The production earns a minimum 6 out of 10 points based on key creative functions that are performed by Canadians. At least either director or screenwriter positions, and at least one of the 2 lead performers must be Canadian. A minimum of 75% of program expenses or post-production expenses are paid to Canadians or Canadian companies. Yes, they're very much trying to keep the work in Canada, if you will, or trying to promote a lot of those Canadians up.
Again, technically I don't mind it, but I'm sure there's a bunch of holes with that.
I'm also one of those people where in the world of the international global village, like I showed you earlier, it's not about being a Canadian anymore. It's about being a person that's putting themselves out in front of the world. As a digital creator, trying to meet some of these broadcasting requirements, CanCon requirements, are incredibly difficult, if not nearly impossible. Remember, these CanCon requirements are only going to benefit or protect the already established legacy media companies that already know how to abide by these laws. If this would ever regulate a YouTube or TikToker, for instance, right, which according to this bill is trying not to, a lot of those people cannot match that CanCon requirement, which means immediately, based on like how Canadian content is pushed or what this bill wants to do, they would immediately be thrown down in the feeds compared to legacy media companies that, hey, coincidentally, wink wink, already have these elements in place. Now, of course, they very much specifically like to say the act does not apply in respect of a program that is uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service by a user of the service for transmission over the internet to a reception of other users of the service. So basically, I guess what they're trying to say here is it's not going to affect people that are YouTubers who are trying to, upload videos and send those videos to other YouTubers. Just like if somebody uploads something to Facebook, it's not going to affect somebody that's receiving, a video on Facebook. So people who are partaking in the social media platform would not be affected.
Okay.
However, throughout this entire bill, I find it very difficult that they haven't actually specifically said anything regarding amateur or professional level productions. In fact, if you try to Google that, they don't really make that an actual, point. When we looked at this like a year ago, the big problem was they weren't really trying to isolate. The government, the ministers will tell you, hey, it's not going to affect the YouTuber or the cat video person. We need that in law. It can't be vague, all right? It can't be out there because, yes, while sure, the law seems to affect mostly Netflix, Amazon, and is trying to force larger, regulations onto them, who knows if at one point YouTubers or, at one point TikTokers may not be brought into the forefront. Even the chair confirmed that Bill C-11 would capture user content. It would take years to implement this even. So, for instance, one of them is Ian Scott appeared before the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage yesterday, and Bill C-11 proved to be a topic of discussion. The exchanges got testy at times. Oh boy, I love Canadian journalism. First, Scott was asked about the regulation of user content, confirming what has been obvious for months despite denials from Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez. The following exchange from Conservative MP Rachel Thomas got Scott on the record. Thomas, who basically straight up said, Bill C-11 does in fact leave it open to user-generated content being regulated by the CRTC. I recognize there have been arguments against this. However, Dr. Michael Geist has said, the indisputable reality is that the net result of those provisions is that user-generated content is in the bill. Jeanette Patel from YouTube Canada said the draft's law wording gives the broadcast regulator, in other words, scope to oversee everyday videos posted for other users to watch. Now, of course, that was a conservative member saying it. At this point, Scott, the CRTC chair, says, as constructed, there is a provision that would allow us to do it as required. So remember, even if the government tells you that they can't oversee, they don't care about overseeing you,
the bill allows
they still somehow have the regulatory power to do that over you. It's fucked up, and the Canadian government is a really, really, really silver-tongued beast when it comes to this kind of shit, like any government.
Like any government, yeah, I was about to say.
And everything mentioned in the bill that sounded really nice completely encapsulates the fact that none of this is ever going to benefit the actual creators that you like to follow. Your favorite Canadian creators would not really benefit from this shit, okay? So to understand, let's get into how this will work, okay? Now, when it comes to YouTube specifically, as of right now, when it comes to the algorithm, I get watched by the international community. Canadian, not Canadian, it doesn't matter. Everyone gets my videos recommended as solid as possible. Okay. Now, of course, if this is properly implemented, YouTube obviously is coinciding that when it comes to things like, you know, professional music videos that are uploaded on their platform or any professional piece, obviously they actually cave in to the Canadian government on that. You can read it right from YouTube right here.
Interesting.
As we said before, we aren't opposed to regulation, and we will continue to do our part to support the Canadian creator economy. And we agree that an official music video should be regulated the same way, whether it's shown on YouTube or TV. But of course, that is not something that's specifically mentioned in this bill as far as I've read it. YouTube is simply telling the Canadian government, just please at least mention specific language to exclude user-generated content. The videos that you, me, and your favorite YouTubers, and not just your favorite YouTubers, your favorite Twitch streamers, your favorite TikTokers, your favorite Facebook gamers.
All of the self-made content creators, yes, the single player content creators,
your favorite Twitter gamers, whatever the fuck exists on that platform, all those people need to be excluded, because as of right now the Canadian government has some level of regulatory oversight on a place they really goddamn shouldn't. Now, why it's really bad is, again, if this is to pass, and of course Canada wants to promote Canadian content over everyone else, within the Canadian YouTube space, what could effectively happen is, let's say that somebody's watching videos on YouTube, a Canadian person is just watching YouTube videos. Now, of course, in terms of tech content, they may be given a video from Marquise Brownlee or a video from Linus Tech Tips. Under this, because of how it sounds, it seems like Linus Tech Tips would be given the A-OK on promoting his content over Marquise Brownlee, simply because Linus is a Canadian promoting to Canadian. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't take into factor the quality of the video, how applicable that video is to the actual user it's being recommended to. So let's say Linus gets recommended to some Canadians simply because they're Canadian, but they have no interest in watching the video from Linus. Well, all of a sudden, Linus's click-through rate would astronomically go down, which would impact his promotion of content in the entire global world. Theoretically, all right, and of course, in a practical sense, I would be willing to put my left nut on status and say for most Canadians, this would be a detrimental impact to our growth on this platform in compared to our peers.
Okay, so because you get recommended locally rather than relevancy, this would, and people are clicking and they're not interested in it, then they leave. That would show the world that your videos are not interesting, therefore they would not promote it to other people in the world, because your local in society, like wherever you are from, they did not appreciate your video on a major level.
Honestly, if there was even an option to opt out from having Canadians view my content, I may actually consider it if it means not being impacted globally. And how fucked is it, as a Canadian, I even have to consider banning other Canadians from watching the content that I make?
Because
why would that even come to my mind? Again, it's the government having no fucking clue about what they're doing, and instead having some form of regulatory oversight, because let's be honest about what this is, okay? Legacy media is dying, okay? This is simply a way for digital, companies that are coming in from outside Canada, like Netflix, like Amazon, that are promoting better content, creating better content, to basically have money being shifted to these legacy media companies and trying to keep them alive. This is simply protectionism to protect legacy media again in Canada, even if the content is bad, without factoring that we live in a global village. For people who are making content digitally, the fact that our audiences have always been from an international, spectrum, the United States, the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, basically any country, India out there, the fact that Canada wants to, implement some of its...
I agree with him, but here's the other problem, because it's a global village. Someone who lives in shitty tax brackets, or let's say it like this: you're a successful YouTuber, content creator, whatever. You make bank, right? You're gonna be taxed for your profits. It depends on where you live. However, your work is international, so you can technically move to anywhere in the world where you would pay the least amount of taxes. You will make the same amount of money, but that also fucks the environment that, like, the place you grew up in, right? The place that allowed you to expand. So that really sucks for that place you came from, to not have some regulatory control over your content, because they want to keep you there, right? And so, like, again, this is in a very negative way that they're keeping you there. It's actually like they're more like asking you to leave because of this. But I do agree that's like, look, it's kind of like, it's a shitty take, I get it, but it's like, not everyone's a patriot, but you can't deny that the reason you're successful has a lot to do with where you were raised, It's like, if you're a YouTuber, right, and it's like you live in let's say you live in a socialist environment, right? Let's say, or like there's what's it called? You live in a place where there is basic income, right? And it's supplemented by taxing people who have a lot of money. You decide, you know what? I'm not gonna work. I'm just gonna live off the basic income, live very, very minimalistically. But I'm gonna make content, and then I'm gonna make it big. And you make it big, and then you decide, well, I don't need the basic income. I'm gonna go somewhere else. So you're effectively screwing your ecosystem that you grew up in, because that ecosystem is what allowed you to bloom and to grow. And now you're saying, well, screw those guys, I'm out because I made it, right? So it's like, there should be some benefit to that system from your success. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't feel like a good exchange overall, for these cases. But at the same time, I also believe in small government. I believe government should just, be there for your protection, basically, and like to make sure your rights are not infringed on, and everything else depends on the person. But the problem is, when you live like that, it also offers you certain opportunities that other places cannot. And when you take advantage of these opportunities to make something of yourself, you can very easily leave to a place that doesn't offer these, unless you are super rich, and then it's very beneficial for you to live in a place that doesn't tax you as much,
Happy policies in the entire internet as a whole leaves me a bit shocked, bewildered, and honestly, I don't like the state of Canadian internet freedom anymore, given the rate of how these
all I'm saying. But by the way, I'm not defending Canada in this, because I feel like what they're doing is like the wrong way to go about it. However, I do believe that there should be some benefit to the place that helped you bloom, It's like, imagine working for a company. The company is putting its effort into teaching you the job and whatever. And it's like, yeah, you're working and it's like you're not costing the company really anything, but you're also not benefiting it, but you are wasting its resources and efforts to teach you to do a job. And then when you have the experience, but the company only offers you, let's say, $120,000 a year. There's another company that's going to offer you $180,000 a year, and you already are qualified because the previous company taught you everything. That is really unfair for that company. That is a risk companies have to take, but I don't think it's a risk that has to be taken. It's like some sort of contract that prevents you from going to another place, something like that. But again, I also hate that puts this limitation on a person. It's like, bro, I don't want to work here. Like, what do you want to do? Like, I just don't want to work here. I want to work there, right? So what are you gonna do about it, right? And I just don't like that people can take advantage of these situations. I don't like it as much as I don't like that places can take control over your life to that extent as well.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen,
it's a weird
Canadian
one. It's really hard to balance
sucks
it.
A lot of ass. And if you ask anybody that actually produces content in Canada, you'll realize that this doesn't ever benefit a lot of the racialized communities that Canada wants to promote. In fact, if anything, this will be a bill that outright promotes and preserves a lot of those old legacy media outlets out there, and tries to keep them at the forefront, basically keeping a dying breed active. This is like an IV drip for dying media, all right? At least from what I'm reading, all right? At least from what I'm understanding.
Much though, but they need it.
When it comes to services like Netflix and services like Amazon, it might make them reconsider being in the Canadian market, okay, if they have to comply by some really insane arbitrary rules.
Yeah, they buy their way
and of
through.
Course, having the provision to have literal content creators like you, me, out there affected, especially in Canada, is very, very questionable. Very, very against the idea of this. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to make this video because as a Canadian, these laws oftentimes confuse me. These laws oftentimes bewilder me on how they're ever even passed.
You really have to read between the lines on, like, whenever you read legislation, bills and stuff like that. It's crazy. Right? It's the whole thing where it's like certain stuff sound really good on paper, like when you know, it's like the whole like I don't want to get into the voting stuff. Let's see what other stuff that the U.S. government has tried to do recently. Okay, let's say the gun stuff, right? Like the gun stuff. So here's the thing. So this is why, for example, conservatives are defending gun laws, aside from it's being in the Constitution, whatever. But the reason, since the Constitution's to avoid having a tyrannical government, so the citizens can protect itself. Now, right now, when the government tries to disarm the people, even if the government is not doing it out of like maliciousness and they're doing it for the betterment, even if it is in the short term benefiting the people, the problem is this government might be good, next one might be good, but the one after that might not be good. And what are you gonna do about it when the government is tyrannical and not good for you? You can't do anything. It's like they can come and they can shoot you up, you know? It's like, shut the fuck up, you can't say shit. That is the biggest problem with these stuff, where it's like, that's the reason why conservatives are so for what's called small governments, because they're thinking of the far future. Right? Imagine, okay, so this is how like kings, monarchies used to work, right? You have a king, right? It's like, how does one become a king? Like, someone wants to make his own kingdom, right? He's probably a hero or whatever, and they won battles, and he has a lot of followers, and he's like, yo, we're making our own freaking kingdom, right? It's like somehow, you know, from a tribe, from a village to a kingdom, right? And people love this person and they're willing to follow him. Well, his son might be an also good person, but he's not his father, and he didn't win the battles, but he's blood of someone who was noble, so he gets the crown, right? Now this guy's still okay, and he's following his father's footsteps, whatever. He understands the legacy, blah blah blah. Now he has a son. The son's like heard stories about his grandfather, but his grandfather's still alive, which is the original ruler, and he's still there. Like, he's still, I don't know, like, still a good person. Tries to make it, like, tries to be honorable, but he's substantially more spoiled than his dad, and like his take on the world is going to be different. Now the guy after him is going to be even more spoiled, right? And what is spoiled, right? Spoiled leads to rot, right? So and eventually you're going to have a rotten king. Now this rotten king has all the power. He is the king. It is a monarchy. Whatever he says goes, and he got there by blood, right? So it's like, it's not like anyone chose him to be the leader. Everyone who knew why this bloodline is in power is already gone, right? So it's like, now you're left, like, your descendants are left with this asshole who's doing whatever he wants, and eventually will lead the kingdom to ruin. right? And there's nothing you can do about it. That's the problem with like a government that controls you. It's not the immediate problem, it's the futuristic problem. Like you're not going to maintain your society for very long if the government has too much power, because eventually the government will be corrupt. Even if right now the government is not corrupt, you give the government so much power, trust me, it's not that hard to be a corrupt person and hide it, to get to power and then abuse your power. That happens all the time. Look at most businessmen. You know? So that is the issue with big government. It's not like the current problem, it's the futuristic problem that it will cause.
And then I realized the game is actually rigged from the beginning. But it doesn't have to be. All right, if you're a Canadian out there and you don't like Bill C-11, let your MP know, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a fucking democracy. These fucking heathens work for us, okay? You let them know. You let them know that you're not voting for them anymore, and all of a sudden, they'll fucking get down on their knees and suck you off if they have to. That's how government works. That's how mafia works. That's how democracy works. Stand up, fight for your freedoms, okay? And make sure your internet is as deregulated as possible, because let me tell you, it's the last bastion for freedom. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mudahar, and I'm going to take this.
I would say the internet is our last bastion of freedom was right before the internet. It's because of the internet we're going to lose all of our freedoms.
Doctor told me to. I am out.
And to save Canadian YouTube. I went to Parliament to save Canadian YouTube bill C-11. Okay, so it's the... When was this? June 4. Okay, so it was in before that. Right, so that was Some Ordinary Gamers, Canadian Law Bill C-11. I don't think anyone will be interested in this outside of Canada, but it's good. It is pretty interesting to me. I do live in Canada, and it does have to do with me trying to have some YouTube, some Twitch going. You know, experimenting with, and so I want to see what this is about. Anyways, give this guy a like, shout out, whatever, I don't know, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. When I ring the bell, honestly, I don't ring bells, really. I don't like getting notifications on my phone. I just like, you know, logging onto YouTube and seeing what my top 10 recommended and picking one from there, watching that, and then see if the recommended changes, etc, etc. But yeah, anyways, that was a good video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.